Absolutely. I, go up to people fishing on the pier, drinking at Starbucks, enjoying a smoke break. So get all sorts of get people in every single state of being.
Cool.
Darrin, could you say a little bit about yourself?
So I'm an electrical engineer, and space is one of my hobbies.
How long has it been a hobby of yours?
Maybe 10 or 15 years.
And was there anything in particular, some event that kind of woke you up to it, or how did that
So
happen?
I was in a NASA contest for the CubeSat to go on the SLS.
Okay.
And while I was doing that, I realized a way around the tyranny of the rocket equation,
Oh, tell
and I
me.
patented that. And so that's kind of why I created a business persona around that idea. I thought it was going to be a big thing. Basically, in space, because you have to carry the fuel with you, the further you go, the higher the amount of fuel that you have to have at takeoff is. And then there's a certain delta velocity where basically it's impractical to have more, right? If you have 99%, going to 99.9 is very hard, and 99.999 is very hard. So this is called the tyranny of the rocket equation. And anywhere you want to go in the solar system, you have to have delta velocity, because the sun's gravity, the way you repel against that is with v squared over r. So you need to have the v to repel against the gravity.
Okay.
And so this is called the tyranny of the rocket equation, and it's like a big named problem. The way to explain my idea is if you took a solar sail spacecraft and you refueled your rocket halfway,
Hmm.
you only need the square root of the fuel, because instead of having one big exponential, you have two little exponentials.
Okay.
And if you could refuel it 10 times, you'd have 10 tiny exponentials. And if you could refuel it 1,000 times, it would be almost nothing, right? So the idea is, instead of using solar sail spacecraft to carry fuel, the solar sail spacecraft would become the fuel. So you dock with a solar sail spacecraft, and then you'd eject it the same way you would eject a train off of train tracks. And that gives you momentum in the opposite direction. It's conservation momentum. If one goes this way, one has to go this way.
Hmm.
And so the idea is, if you just get rid of rocket fuel, so there's no rocket fuel at all involved, you just use these solar sail propelled reaction mass, and they go and maybe they go a year ahead of time along the course.
Hmm.
And then you come along and dock with them and expel them. And as you're expelling them, you go, and then you dock with the next bunch and you expel them, and as you're going. So this has two advantages. One advantage is you don't carry the reaction mass. So you're not you've got lots of little places that you're refueling, but you're basically taking lots of small trips. And those trips add linearly. So if you have one trip and it's this much, you have 10, it's 10 times that. So
Hmm.
instead of having an exponential, now you have a line. The problem is you have to have thousands and thousands and thousands of these things in space to begin with. And when mass to low Earth orbit is $4,500 a kilogram, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Once it's $10 a kilogram, it becomes a much more interesting idea. Okay, so that's my attraction to space. Go with your normal questions.
Well, I guess
Sorry.
I just going to the whole 200 years in the future thing. Do you think we'll get to 10 kilograms? $10 a kilogram?
I think SpaceX's internal cost may be $10 per kilogram in the next 5 years.
Okay. And
So
how?
that doesn't mean you and I can buy that, but SpaceX's cost.
Sure, sure. But even if they charge like 100 times that, it'd still be way cheaper.
So I think this patent idea of mine, it breaks a way of thinking that everybody has about it being expensive to go between places in space, because it's fundamentally not. All of your reaction mass is reused, right? Those solar sail spacecraft are still spacecraft when they come off, and they can go and be used again.
Wow.
So the idea that space is expensive, it's too expensive to go to Mars, disappears. Going to Mars is almost free.
Hmm.
And so then the second idea is, on the moon, if you mine and create solar panels on the moon, and you can create 1% solar panels, and you can cover the entire moon in 1% solar panels, and you can sell that at 3 cents per kilowatt hour, which is a reasonable price, I think it's $60 trillion a year. It may have been the industry plus that is 60 trillion, but it's crazy money if you could do the whole moon. And Mars is bigger but further away, but it comes out at roughly the same number. So if you could fully industrialize the moon, it's worth about 3 times what the current US is worth. If you could fully industrialize Mars, it's worth about 3 times what the current US is worth. So it's real money, right? It's not pet projects. I might make $1 million. You know, it's whoever does that is going to make trillions of dollars. So I think 100 years from now, you're going to see a large fraction of the moon be covered in solar panels, have economic value, maybe $1 trillion of economic activity on the moon within 100 years. I think that's coming.
Now, I've heard some people say that trying to get solar power is basically, if you look at the progression of the development of energy, we've gotten to more and more dense storage of energy. You know, first we started with like logs, then we had coal, and then we had oil, and then we had nuclear. And that basically solar is in the opposite direction in terms of less density of energy, in terms of amount of area for energy. And I've heard some people argue that, you know, really fusion is like the direction that would be a better way to invest in, because you're not dependent upon your proximity to the sun or the availability of solar radiation. And essentially, you can be in like the lunar night and still have energy. You could be far away from the sun and still have energy. And I was just kind of wondering where your thoughts were on that.
So there's an Israeli guy that solved this. I can't remember his name. He said, if you go to the moon and you go to, I think it's the South Pole, but I'm not 100% sure. It's one of the poles. And you have nearly, in a 600-kilometer radius, you get there's sunlight on your array every day, all the time. If you just spiral out, so you build production lines 600 kilometers, and you don't need batteries because it's always shining somewhere. The light is always touching. And then you just spiral out and cover the rest of the moon. You now have a grid where it's always sunny. It's like the British Empire of yesterday. You know, the sun never sets. Well, now you don't need batteries. So now half the complexity goes away. It's always running all the time. It becomes much cheaper to do. I think the argument about fusion and fission is kind of like investing. Some people say, don't invest in this is better. And that might be true. I don't know. But investing makes you money. If I can buy a solar panel for $100, and that solar panel will make me inflation adjusted $120, even if the interest rate's 8%, I made $12. So it's like a money machine, right? You want to buy as much solar as you possibly can. Perhaps you want to buy as much nuclear as you possibly can. But you basically, you want to put all of your money into solar because it's printing money for you, right? It's like if you're able to buy solar and offset cost at a better rate than you paid for the solar, that's free money, right? So the moon is a perfect example. There's no fusion on the moon. There's no fission on the moon. If you could go and put solar on the moon, that's just free money. Perhaps $1 trillion of free money. So while there may be an argument to be made that fission is better or fusion is better, and certainly in some cases it is, it's free money, right? You can just make all this solar on the moon, and you have to make it on the moon, build it on the moon, construct it. If you ship it, you got a different argument. But if you're constructing it on the moon, the stuff you're making it out of is free because it's on the moon, nobody owns it. The process could be free if you have robots there doing it. The energy could be free if you're using solar that you already built. It's just like free money, trillions and trillions of dollars of free money.
I know if you create, it's sort of like a machinery network that's able to operate on itself, build, do the mining, do the refining, do the manufacturing, do the installation, and replicate itself. Then, that is a completely different situation than, sending them from Earth or even, and it doesn't matter how long it takes, right? I mean, you just let it go.
And I'm talking about 1% efficient. If you could make 10% efficient, it's 10 times better. right? I'm talking about 1% efficient, which is probably realistic, making stuff on the moon. It's not so great. If the moon was going to be worth $100 trillion, even if that was 1,000 years in the future, that's probably still good to buy that stock, right?
Hmm.
So the numbers are so astronomically large. If you look at the moon and you say, is that going to be priced like Manhattan is priced? Or is that going to be priced like Arizona is priced? Or is that going to be priced like the ocean is priced? Right? The ocean's basically free or has no value. If it's priced like anything on the earth, even the worst areas on the earth, it's billions and billions and trillions of dollars. And it's just free money. It's just sitting there. Just go get it.
And it feels like the Chinese are looking at it that way.
I think the US has about 1 or 2 decades where we have extreme dominance in space. And if we can't do something dramatic in the next 10 or 20 years, I think the Chinese civilization economically will be stronger than us in 20 years,
Hmm.
unless we've done something with our current advantages. So the clock is really ticking, but we'll see.
Let's see. It's is it from a human perspective, it's really cool to see sort of that forcing function out there. Like really uh, something compelling action not to be deferred, generations hence, but to actually happen within inside of our lifetime. But talking about the moon, I know this is going to be a crazy question, but I generally
Sure.
ask everybody, did you know that NASA is planning to send astronauts back to the moon?
I've heard about that. Yeah. So that'll be interesting.
Would it surprise you that most of the people I talk to on the street have no clue?
Yeah, yeah. So a lot of people, it doesn't really filter into their consciousness. But I don't think it's really filtered into NASA's consciousness that if Elon is going to be sending thousands of people to Mars, he's going to be sending thousands of people to the moon too, because that's like the staging area. It's faster. He can do all of his practicing. They can work out their bugs. So NASA may be spending 10 people or 20 people, but the industrial movement, there's going to be thousands of people and tens of thousands of people on the moon
And I
in the
mean, it's
next.
already got two people signed up for two different trips, Dear Moon and then Dennis Tito with for the second one.
If Elon can get $10 to low Earth orbit, that I'm a little flaky on the numbers, but that's something like 220 to $450 per kilogram landed on the moon
Hmm.
by a recurring um, um, spaceship. So coming back to the Earth, so they haven't lost the spaceship. So that starts to be very compelling for building things on the moon that are 100 times cheaper than NASA has ever dreamed. And all of a sudden, instead of having one moon base, you could have 100 moon bases. If those moon bases are producing value in any way, maybe you could have 1,000 moon bases, and then you've got the economy of scale starts to kick in. I think in the next 100 years, we're going to start to think about space in the way that we currently think about flying. And 120 years ago or 125 years ago, that was alien to them, just like space is alien to us now. Flying
Mhm.
was alien to them before, I think it was 1903 or 1901 or somewhere in there. And they thought it was impossible. It wasn't clear anybody could do it. And now we all do it. It's nothing, right? You take your kids on it, you don't even think about it.
Hmm.
I think space is going to be like that within 150 years. So
Wow.
let's see.
That'd be amazing. Yeah, I was looking at the moon a few years ago, and I was imagining like a set of greenhouses being built, and then eventually they all like sort of grow and merge together. Um, and then I was imagining protesters, label themselves as gray peace because they want to keep the moon gray and not green. It's kind of
Well, they have to buy their ticket to get there first. So I think there'll be a filter that some of those people are not um they do things in their own backyard. They're not going over to a different county to protest or a different country to protest. So if you have to go to the moon to protest, I think that may filter out a lot of it.
that's true. That's true. Um, when you think about the future of humanity in 200 years, is there anything else that comes to mind?
So I think the big thing that's happening now, or the big three things. Everything in civilization is limited by humans' ability to do the work, humans' ability to do the thinking, and the material resources like the iron, the coal, the whatever. As we go to space, we're building robots that can do the work. We're building artificial intelligence that can do the thinking. And outer space has 100 times or 1,000 times or a million times more stuff. So we're about to become 100 times or 1,000 times or a million times richer as a civilization
Hmm.
or as a human race. And I don't think anybody has really internalized that, right? We're right. And while all this is happening, they're talking about perhaps curing aging and perhaps you live forever or 1,000 years or whatever. Um, we're right on the door of some very, very positive things. So much so that it's difficult to imagine, right? Before penicillin, people couldn't imagine that you wouldn't die from colds, right? It was something they couldn't imagine. And now we view it as a great tragedy when you do die from a cold, right?
Right.
Um,
Or even scurvy. I've been listening to this book called Longitude, and just, like Captain Cook had lost half his people, to scurvy, and sauerkraut was the big rescuing thing. It's just like basic stuff.
yeah. So I think humanity will change in the next 20, 30, 50 years and will probably change in a way that makes us all extremely wealthy. Now, Americans are like 6 times more wealthy than the national average, the global average.
Mm.
So the first benefit will probably be to bring everybody up closer, to kind of even that gap a little. But if you have a factor of 100 or 1,000 more wealth, everybody's going to be richer, even the people that are already rich. And you imagine people that are currently dirt poor, working a job they hate. If you had a robot that could do that job for you, if you had the resources to go in school and do whatever, brings passion to your life, it could be much, much better on multiple levels. Not just the total amount of things, but also the fulfillment and doing things and having time to spend with your family and all kinds of things that we don't currently have. And we think of that as normal. In 20, 30, 50 years, we might have those things and think of not having those things as abnormal. So,
Yeah, it's sort of like internet access or electricity or refrigerator or microwave or an airport nearby or a car.
and we all grew up without internet and we thought it was normal. And now all the kids think that that's like the worst penalty possible. So,
I was at my wife's coworkers meeting last night. It was like a going away party for her old boss, and someone was reminiscing about dial-up internet, uh, and he was saying this generation has no clue how good it is. He's like, when you would download a picture, you would have a relationship with the lady before you even got to the good parts because it took that long.
and when somebody called you, everything would crash.
That's
And then
true
you'd be
too.
upset. Why are you calling me?
Like, so it's just amazing, and that was like leading edge, and now you're like seeing Neuralink with people playing chess with their brains, so whole
You,
nother change.
you can go on eBay and you can buy scanning electron microscopes for like $6,000.
Wow.
In the 1980s, that was like a $400,000 machine was like the pinnacle of science. And now you can buy the used ones for like $5,000. If it's broken, maybe $1,000. It's just crazy. Things that were once so difficult, like the NASA's computer for their landing on the moon is less powerful than your computer that you're using this for this interview or your phone or your watch or anything. It becomes easy to compete with the entire civilization from 20 years ago. And so that's kind of a strange, empowering thing where one person has the ability to kind of achieve what the entire human race achieved 50 years ago or something like that in some small area. And that's impressive.
It
So,
is. I mean, inspired, empowered people making stuff happen. And that's why I think these debates about should we do this or do that are completely useless. If you think something should be done, go build a team of people that agree with you, make it happen. Forget everybody else. They let them do their thing. There's enough resources, enough people, enough talent, enough everything for Moon and Mars, orbiting space cities and, the moons of Saturn and Jupiter.
And I think you'll find you can do the moon, you can do the Mars, you can do the climate change, you can do build better food that allows you to have more food and more people, and social like healthcare for mental, feeling good and not depressed, and things like that. All of these things can happen. Whichever one you feel is the thing, go do that. You can make that happen.
Hmm.
We have a lot of people that expect you to go make what I want to happen, and that's not realistic, right? You have to go do your own thing, and you do. Um, it's not fair for someone else to say, I like dogs, and you need to stop your space thing, and so we can put all the resources into dogs. Just like it wouldn't be fair for me to say, I like space, you can't put your resources into dogs. There's benefits to both, right? Mankind has been much better because of dogs. Mankind has been much better because of going to space and having satellites and having cell phones and all kinds of things. So there's room for everybody to kind of do their thing and make the world a better place.
Absolutely. And one person that wants to do something to make dogs better and actually goes and does something is going to be way more useful to everybody than somebody that writes an article about how we should be taking care of the dogs.
And some of the first anti-aging stuff will actually be dogs
Hmm.
because it's easier to get regulatory approval. So people that are trying to extend dogs' lives are pushing the science which can help extend our lives, which we all think of as kind of important because we'd like to live longer and live healthier and all this kind of stuff. So that person that went off and did dog biology, they may be the person who saves the human race, right? They may be, cure aging and have this huge benefit for everybody, but that was hard for everybody to anticipate. And if they'd said, no, don't do dogs, they would have cut off a very healthy benefit for mankind. And I think
I
space
think
is the same way.
I think this is where computational biology and computational chemistry really becomes important because to actually see the long range effects of like medical treatment and healthcare and stuff on people requires you to actually have people that get that and see how they do. And I don't want to find out 60 years from now that what we were doing was ineffective. I want to find out now what's ineffective and not effective. So I'm like, you should have um, uh, you should have a computational model of people and then be able to apply treatments to them and then speed up time so that, in a matter of weeks, you could figure out what decades are.
They're getting close. Some of the ways that they can look inside the cell are getting amazing. And the moon and Mars will actually help that because Mars is a difficult environment. And so you might want to engineer organisms that could live on Mars. If you could engineer something that could live outside, that's a huge benefit rather than living inside.
Mhm.
But to do that requires advances in the biotech. And so there's kind of a forcing function for those advances if you go to Mars. And if you don't go to Mars, that forcing function doesn't exist to the same degree. And it may be that things that are forced by that turn out to be very beneficial, right?
Mhm.
And when NASA went to the moon, they needed everything to be smaller. So they went with the transistor instead of the vacuum tube. And that pushed us all towards transistors instead of vacuum tubes. And that's like a factor of a million advance on our society because you get, so many different transistors inside your computer chip. Well, if they'd never gone to the space, that might have happened 50 years in the future. We might still be using much more primitive computers. So sometimes the benefits come in directions you don't anticipate them coming.
Yeah, it's really amazing. The moonshot really pushed technology in a way because it made us have to do things that we didn't do before. But now that we've done them, and we've become really risk averse. It's all about reducing risk, which means using proven techniques, which means the exact opposite of innovation.
So I think the innovation, when you have to do things differently, or you dare to do things differently, or whatever, most of your advances are in that space because you've already fully mined this space. It's kind of like a mine that has diamonds in it or something. If you already dug through it all, you're not likely to find new diamonds. But if you have a new mine that you've never mined through, there might not be any diamonds, but maybe there's copper in it, right? And maybe at some point later, you're going to use that copper. And so it might be a defeat that there's no diamonds. But then 20 years later, somebody else, oh, there's copper there. We can use that. I think space exploration is going to be like that, where it may not give us instant rewards of the nature that we're thinking. Like Psyche has all this gold and platinum on it, and maybe nobody will ever mine that. Maybe it'll just be that they go to the moon and they build a astronomy thing on the moon that can spot the killer asteroid coming in and give us 10 years and save all of humanity. That's probably not the direction we're thinking. Let's go to the moon so we can save all of humanity. But if you go to the moon and you build the hardware on the moon to do astronomy, it enables you to do those kinds of things that you can't easily currently do. You build a much, much larger telescope and you get much, much better resolution. And so there's all kinds of benefits. But you don't really know until you build out the entire civilization, and then one little piece of that turns out to be the valuable bit. And you didn't know which piece it was going to be. You have to build out the whole thing.
That
At
makes
least that's my.
sense. No, I like it. And then, just the having multiple observers in multiple places, uh, who knows what kind of inconsistencies will come to apparent view that need to be sorted out that lead to aha moments that are very hard to anticipate.
All of these observation cameras that we have around society, whenever an unexplained thing happens, like the dog uses the thing to fish something out of the pool and it's, oh, that's amazing, nobody would believe. Because you have those cameras and all those observation points, you can see these things, and it helps you to understand things that would have otherwise been a mystery. Well, having more points where humanity lives, and the moon is close to the Earth, but Mars is far away. So Mars gives you a very different vantage point.
Yeah.
It may turn out that helps us to understand things in a way that we can't anticipate before we do it. Just like you didn't put in those Ring doorbell things to watch the dog get something out of the pool, but once you have it there, you can see the dog do this strange behavior and then put it on the internet and everybody can see it. So a lot of progress comes from directions we don't expect, but you have to do all of it to get the one little bit that turns out to be valuable. You don't know which bit it's going to be.
That's true. So if you could, would you take a trip to space?
Probably not.
Oh,
So
really?
yeah, honestly, I don't like dangerous things. And so it strikes me that it'll be a long time before it's less dangerous than airline travel. So maybe if it was less dangerous than airline travel, maybe I'd go. But I'm not actually personally drawn to go to Mars or go to the moon. Lots of people are, personally drawn to do it. I'm technologically drawn to do it. I want to build the technology that does it. Whether I personally do it or not, it's not so important.
But now I wonder if they're really personally drawn through it, or if they're just imagining the ticker tape parade whenever they get back.
That's true. That's true. Once it becomes something that everybody's done, it makes you wonder if those people will still be interested. But I think the experience of being at zero gravity, that's like a different state of life. And so I think a lot of people are drawn to that, like to feel the different feelings or to experience the different experiences.
That makes sense. I just, go to the top of Mount Everest, or, go to Antarctica, or see whales in the Pacific or something.
Well, so it's like if Everest had an elevator, I'd do it, right? But if I had to climb it and have the risk of death, there's no way.
You don't need to see the frozen mountain climber that's nobody's removed.
Doesn't mean that much to me.
No, I totally makes sense. Well, Darrin, that's pretty much all the questions I had. Is there anything else that you wanted to add, or any questions for me, perhaps?
I think I'm good. This is a good project. How long have you been doing it?
Since 2019. So I've
Oh.
interviewed a person a day starting in December of 2019, counting down to the end of 2024, which was the year we were supposed to have people on the moon when I started the project. But regardless of how that date changes, into 2024 is my target. So
Cool. Well, good work.
thank you so much. You have a good night, and I really appreciate getting to know you and getting to add your views to my project.
Okay, well, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.